And welcome to episode 172 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up at the night sky, and this podcast is for anyone else who likes going out under the stars. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the lunar eclipse observations. We've had some observations, received lots of observations and amazing photographs from our listeners. And we're going to do another giveaway at the end, thanks to longtime listener and frequent correspondent, Jim. So how was your week, Shane?
It was good, not too bad at all. We had our first winter storm and dealt with that, and then the forecast leading up to the eclipse was sort of spotty here, but it turned out to be not too bad from most accounts that I've heard. I unfortunately did not see the eclipse. I slept through my alarm. I shouldn't say I didn't see it. I probably saw about the last 5% of the eclipse at like 6 a.m. or 6:30, something like that. Yeah. How was your week?
Yeah, it was week was really good. I heard from Skywatcher, and my AZ GTI mount is coming back to me. They said they adjusted the spring assembly on the AZ axis, and they said it was set too tight. So I'm not really sure. And they said the gears were not meshing correctly, which was basically, I think, our analysis as well. So it sounds like we were on the right ball there.
Mm-hmm. Any charge coming your way?
No charge, not that I've seen yet. We'll see what happens when it gets across the border. But no, I think it was covered under warranty. Skywatcher was a pleasure to deal with, and they said they also adjusted the tension to make it smoother somehow. Like I think there's a few different adjustments, like as we saw when we kind of looked at it, and they even updated the firmware to the latest build. And they said they would send it Monday, and then like 5 minutes later, I received tracking notification. So by sending it Monday, I think they meant that probably would end up in a truck on Monday. But I already have I already had the tracking number, very shortly after receiving the first email from them. So I'm super impressed with Skywatcher's service so far. I always wondered, I've never had to do this with any of my astronomy gear to this extent before. I never had like something have such a problem that it basically, I got to send it back in for maintenance. And so I always wondered, and, I know a lot of people out there probably wonder too, and Skywatcher is a big company. And I got to say, they said it would be about 4 to 5 weeks before they got to it and got it fixed. It's been 5 weeks, and now it's in the mail back to me. So they were right on with their estimates. So really, really happy with that. And whenever I wrote them, I did write them from time to time for updates. I think it's only a couple people that work in the shop where I send it to. So I think they are busy. And, considering the price of the mount too, it's a very affordable mount. Mm-hmm. So I definitely appreciate their time and efforts there. But anytime I wrote, they would be back to me within the day. Yeah, very quickly, usually.
Well, that's really positive. I'm glad you're getting the mount back and can get the 100 millimeter back out under some dark skies.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that because that's the mount that I use my TAC 100 on, and I really don't have a backup mount for that, though I have used it on my TAC Lapides manual mount. But for some of the stuff that I do for the sketching and some of the other stuff that I do with it, I want it tracking so that I can sit and sketch and do whatever. And so it's just been kind of annoying not to have that functionality. Also ordered the new William Herschel book. Pretty excited about this. Been waiting for it for a long time. It's called William Herschel, Discoverer of the Deep Sky by Wolfgang Steineke. And I have at least one other book by Wolfgang Steineke, and it's absolutely excellent. And Wolfgang Steineke has an amazing website on the history of astronomy, visual observers, and discovery. And so I'm super excited to get that book. It's supposed to arrive right around the time for the Christmas holidays, and I really plan to be able to sit down and have a good read of that book, during the Christmas period. So I'm very excited for that.
So this is a new release?
Yep, brand new release as of October. And I saw that Mark Bratton, our friend Mark down just south of us here, he's bought his copy, and he of course is I think one of the few people that has gone through and observed and sketched all of the Herschel objects in both the northern and southern hemispheres. So he was pretty excited about it too. So once I saw he placed his order, I'm like, okay, I'm in. It's not a cheap book, right? So
well, and Mark wrote the complete guide to the Herschel objects, Sir William Herschel's star clusters, nebulae, and galaxies. And it's wonderful. If anybody has interest in the Herschel objects, I can't recommend that book enough. And like you said, he sketched, I think, all of them, like all of the observations that he did, but not all of the sketches made their way into the book, but quite a few did. And it's really neat to see what these objects look like through, I believe he was using a 17.5-inch Daub, 15, if I'm not mistaken. 15? Okay.
15-inch f5 Tektron. I think that's what it was. And as a note on that, I was with him when he did the veil and observed that with him. He was doing the sketches and between his views and sketching as he was going to the paper, I was at the eyepiece. So I can confirm that his sketch of the veil is what it looked like through that instrument.
He's an amazing sketcher too. Like, he's really, really talented.
Yeah, he's a great, really awesome observer. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to. I keep thinking I gotta get back. And I talk to him from time to time, and gotta get down. And I don't think I've ever looked through the big telescope. I've been to the observatory, but I haven't looked through that newer telescope he got. I think it was just like 2 or 3 years ago or something.
The 25-inch.
Is it 20? I thought it was 22. But anyway, it's a big scope, and he's got an observatory, and I would like to get some views through it. And then, of course, with the pandemic and everything, it's kind of messed stuff up pretty good. So good.
Yes, indeed.
Eclipse. Let's talk about the eclipse. Let's really get into this.
What eclipse are you talking about, Chris?
The lunar.
Oh. There was a ton of stuff that came out of this in terms of like observations and photographs and observing reports that I saw on Twitter. It was really nice to see that a lot of people were able to observe this event. So, I think that's super cool. And I know you were able to observe it. So I'm really curious to hear about your experience.
Yeah, I had a pretty good view. I got up. My plan was not to start observing it right at the beginning and go right to the end, because I don't know why. I should have taken the day off work. I don't know why I didn't. I just should have, and I didn't. So I knew I was probably only going to have about an hour and a half or so, and therefore I didn't get to see the entire event. So what I did is I planned to get up and go out when it was about halfway between sort of like quote unquote first contact, like when it starts to go into eclipse and when it would be at full eclipse, so that I could find it in case there was clouds. And there was clouds. And so I went out at like 2:15 or 2:20 and ended up watching till about 3:30. When I went out, there was definitely lots of clouds and some small clear breaks. And then eventually it cleared off just after sort of maximum eclipse, and never got to a total lunar eclipse. There was always still, I think like 3%. It was like a 97% eclipsed moon. So you could always still see the moon. And even through the clouds, most of the time, the clouds were thin enough that you could see it. There was the odd time when it kind of got blotted out, and then we get like some clear breaks. But eventually, it did come through. But what I did, Shane, is I was concerned that I would lose it totally, and I hadn't planned to set up a telescope. I thought I would just go out and look, and I thought, I'll find it, and then I'll kind of watch it through binoculars or whatever. And when I went out, I could see some of the clouds were really, really thick. And at first I lost it for a few minutes and then came back. I thought, I'm going to put a telescope on. I think it'll be okay if I get a telescope on it. So I set my FS 60 millimeter Takahashi up, and that was a great idea. That was awesome. That was definitely the best scope to put on it, because it still has a wide field of view. So I could find it really quickly, and then I could keep it in a wide field and view it even when it was covered with some of the clouds that were passing by. So yeah, when you get up, you get up and just observe the end of it, though, I think.
Yeah. When I woke up and got out of bed, like I say, I think there may, and this is just a rough estimate on my part. It was right at the tail end of the eclipse. So I think I maybe caught 5% of the eclipse. And to be perfectly honest, too, like you would never really know looking at the moon. Like I was not able to really distinguish, any part of the moon that was not, quite as bright. So I assume if I would have maybe put some binoculars or some sort of optics on it, I may then have been able to, see some of the difference. But visually, it was really a non-event for me.
Yeah. When I get up at just after 2 and went out, the piece of the illuminated disc that was visible was it's actually much smaller than I thought it would be. I was surprised how much the moon was already eclipsed just halfway through to that maximum point. And it does look strange. And I heard this and read this in a number of reports, as we were leading up to the eclipse. But I kind of felt like nobody really described why it looks strange or so different. And there is a really important difference between a lunar eclipse and just sort of like the regular lunar crescent. And like it definitely does look much different than just a partial illuminated moon. Like it does look different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The thing too that I really noticed in a lot of the photographs was the stunning red. Like it was really like kind of in that brick red. And I guess what I'm kind of curious about, photographs can be manipulated depending on your camera settings and, post processing to show lots of different colors that maybe don't reflect the visual observation. So I'm kind of curious, Chris, like just from a visual standpoint, how did you kind of interpret the depth of the red or the brightness of the red?
It was quite red. And it really displayed what I'd hoped it would display, which is a beautiful gradient. So you went from having that small bit that was still illuminated, just that 3%. I was really surprised how bright that looked, just to the unaided eye. I thought, oh, it's 3% illuminated. That's really not going to show much, here in the city with the unaided eye. But yeah, you could always see it even through cloud. And then the rest of the lunar surface went from being this bright white bit. It then dimmed down to like these sort of blue tones to gray tones to orangish tones to red tones to rust tones. Like it had just this beautiful sweeping range of colors right across the surface. It was just phenomenal.
Wow. Well, that sounds like it might be one of the better eclipses then, even compared to recent eclipses, in terms of just some of that color variance and being able to see it.
Yeah. And when I first set up the 60, I put in just about 8 power. I was just using 8 power and decided that I wanted a little bit more power on it. So I bumped it to 30 and one of my 80-degree eyepieces. And so one of the things that I was looking for, I actually went looking for a few different things, is to observe along the edge of Earth's shadow, because this was going to be a sort of a unique opportunity to have a really long period of time when we'd have the Earth's shadow on the moon, almost completely covering the moon, but never completely covering it. And the one thing I had forgotten to do, I think on just about every other occasion, is to really look to see if I could detect details along that shadow edge, right, of Earth's shadow edge. And I had thought that maybe you would be able to see like craters a little better, anything like that, but it actually doesn't.
No.
It's totally washed out, just as if it is full. And so what we're seeing here, and kind of referring back to what I said earlier, this is the difference between a regular crescent moon that we see every month and a lunar eclipse. And that is that Earth's shadow is not very clearly defined. It's much more, well, it has this gradient to it because what's happening, of course, is the is the light is passing through the upper atmosphere of the Earth, and that is refracting the wavelengths of light. And of course, that's what gives us these tones as well. Like, you don't get this super sharp edge to the shadow. Even looking at an unaided eye, like, although it does look like, there's this shadow on the moon, it's not very sharp. Like when you look at a crescent moon, it has this very, very sharp, clear edge to it. You just feel like you can draw a line along it. But you don't get that with the lunar eclipses.
Yeah, when I photographed the 2015 eclipse that we were talking about last week when we recorded, that was one thing that I noticed too in the photographs, was that there really isn't like that distinct terminator edge that we're used to from normal moon or lunar phases, right?
Yeah,
it really was sort of a gradient, and didn't provide that additional contrasting effect that we're used to seeing with the terminator, which is an interesting observation in and of itself.
that's right. So that's one of the reasons why a lunar eclipse looks different than just your regular crescent moon, and that's because that shadow line is not sharp. However, when the angle of the moon and the sun is such that we see the lunar shadow cutting across, of course, there's no atmosphere on the moon either, but that angle between the sun and the moon and us as an observer on the Earth is such that we get this very clearly defined shadow band. Now, additionally to this, the other thing that makes a lunar eclipse look very different is that when the sun and the moon are angled such to the observer on Earth, of course, it's just the lunar shadow that's causing it, right? Because you have the sun sort of, in a way, kind of in behind or at an angle to us, right? So it's the actual shape of the moon, in a way, that's sort of causing the shadowing on the moon when we see a crescent moon. However, when the Earth's shadow is projected on the moon, it's much larger. So you actually see it as more of a straighter line. It's not going to give you a crescent shape. It's going to give you more like a longer arc, because the shadow of the Earth is much, much larger than the moon is.
No, that's a good explanation.
Yeah, it's pretty cool though.
Yeah, that is really cool. And you preferred the higher magnifications over the lower magnifications, it looks like?
Yeah, I was using like 30 power, and it was pretty neat. So I noticed that the bright area almost blurred into like a blue color, and then slowly turned into like some smoky colors and blending into like an orange and then dark rusty red. And then sometimes as a cloud passed by, sort of like that furthest point from the illuminated bit would blend into space. Like basically there was times when I couldn't even see that at all. And then I noticed that the redness would kind of, as you were looking over the course of, just a few seconds, it would almost appear to shift. So sometimes it would be a little more red, and sometimes the whole thing would almost go like smoky. There was times where I would lose that red color altogether. Now, this, of course, is I'm observing through some clouds, and I'm thinking, oh, it's just the clouds that are causing this effect. And I think it was kind of unstable, and as far as the atmosphere goes. And then as the moon came out of the clouds, I was surprised that this effect continued on, that I would actually still see, even though the clouds were gone, I would still see the redness kind of intensify and then drop off. It wasn't consistent. It definitely wasn't consistent throughout the observation. Now, I don't know if that's an effect of our atmosphere, and maybe as our shadow is being projected into space, there's fluctuations in that, or whether it was just a factor of my own local conditions being, I think they were sort of moderately unstable. It wasn't like there was no ground wind and the seeing was okay, but I think that maybe it was just our atmosphere. But I was kind of surprised to see that the redness kind of fade and then come back and fade and come back. Like it wasn't consistent from moment to moment, but that could have just been a result of seeing.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was sort of that was unexpected, and I hadn't noticed that before, but I wanted to look for that. So I kind of went looking for that as well, because I had thought I saw that in the previous lunar eclipse I observed through a telescope. And then when I did decide to set that up, I'm like, oh, I'm going to take a look for this again. But then the clouds, I thought, oh, the clouds are probably leading to this. But then it was cool when they dipped out, and I was able to get it in a clear sky for half an hour. I was like, no, I can still see this fluctuation.
Very cool. I'm going to ask a question that maybe isn't fair because of the clouds, but did you notice, like, as the moon goes into near complete eclipse or total eclipse, did you notice, like, kind of the darkening of the sky? Did more, did fainter things pop out, or was it too cloudy to notice?
Oh,
that? Yeah.
No, I noticed that, like, even on the clouds. So the moon was up when I went to bed, and you can tell, like, although I can't really see, like, overhead, of course, when I'm in the house, you can tell, like, there's more illumination. I can see sort of more houses and streets, and it's lighting up, like there's a lot of snow around now, and so it's lighting up the snow and everything. And then when I get up at 2, quarter after 2, whatever it was, I looked out and everything was, like, pretty much dark, right? Like, you were in a city as dark as it gets where I am, but definitely you could notice that it wasn't as bright as it was earlier that evening. And then as well as the moon came out of the clouds, I was then able to actually see the Pleiades, which is an open star cluster near where the full moon was that night. And I was like, oh, you can actually see the Pleiades, and it was only, I think, maybe 7 or 8 degrees away or something like that. And you could I wouldn't say it's easy, but you could see it with your eye. And I'm in the city, so it's not necessarily super easy to see anyway. But you could see it as sort of a large area and some faint stars in that region. So then what I had to do, of course, is like, I can't quite get it in my low power field with the 60. So I put the 60 back in the bag, and I keep my Borg mini Borg 50 in the same bag. So I pulled that out, and it gets about a 10-degree field of view, and I could easily fit the near full eclipsed moon with or the near fully lunar eclipsed moon, the near full lunar eclipse, and the Pleiades in the same field of view at the same time. And my wife had come out by this point. I was showing her, and I said, that is a rare sight. I always hear of things that are rare. I'm like, seeing a lunar eclipse is somewhat rare, but being able to see a lunar eclipse and the Pleiades in the same field of view, I thought that was pretty cool to be able to see.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome.
Yeah. We had some listener observations.
Yes. Yeah, quite a few, actually. It was really awesome to see. Like, we always are receiving emails from listeners, but definitely around these bigger events, we get an increase in the amount of emails we receive. And it was awesome to read various reports, and a lot of photographs were sent to us. So yeah, that's awesome that a lot of people were able to observe it. Where to start? So Peter sent us some images through his 90 millimeter SV Bony refractor. I'm not sure. Is that maybe an F6? I think it is.
Well, yeah, I think these are F55, and it's kind of funny because I think we were talking about this the other day, and I was saying that's an interesting telescope. I've always wanted to look through it. I have a lot of small telescopes. Pretty hard to decide, to get a 90 millimeter F5 when I have 2 or 3 telescopes right around that same size. But I've always been interested by that scope. So he sent us a really cool photo of the lunar eclipse taken through that, as well as the Sword of Orion, which, of course, at the very center is the Orion Nebula, which is a star-forming region in Orion, which is well placed in the middle of the night these nights.
And I think he used a guide scope camera, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And if I'm incorrect, I apologize, but I think he was using a guide scope camera. And your comment, which I thought was perfect, was that it really reflected what sort of the visual appearance of these objects through a telescope, which was quite accurate. The shot of M42, I think the nucleus of that is maybe a little bit brighter than it would be visually, but you sort of get an idea of what you would see with the extent of it, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was neat. So Peter had noticed that definitely the sky was getting darker all around, not just the lunar disk. and so he took advantage of the long period of dimming of our celestial neighbor to actually do some deep sky work, which you definitely can do during a lunar eclipse. So typically, of course, the full moon period is typically not at night. We're going to go out and take a look at deep sky objects, but during a lunar eclipse, and this one being over 3 hours long, presents an opportunity to actually start, poking around the sky when you otherwise couldn't. So I thought that was really cool. I wasn't in a dark sky site. I was just in my driveway, and so I was looking at Orion just with my eye. I might have put my binoculars on it or something, but I didn't bother doing any deep sky work. But clearly, Peter is in a better spot than I am, and was able to take a better advantage of it. Very cool.
Yeah. And then Ian sent us an incredible photo of the moon. I would imagine it's at that 97% point, like as far as much of an eclipse as possible that night is what he captured. And I think this has been my favorite photo actually that I've seen of the eclipse, just because it shows a lot of that gradient that you're talking about.
That's right.
Like how it, you see the very kind of limb of the moon and it's not eclipsed and it's quite bright. And then it just goes from like, sort of different tones of soft gray into the softer tones of the reds, and then to, very pronounced brick red at the very opposite side of the moon compared to the bright side. And really, really awesome shot. Like focus is perfect. I don't know if he did any processing, but that's just beautiful. And kind of the other neat thing, Chris, is I don't know if you noticed, but Ian's in Regina. So
oh, is he?
This is exactly what all of the local folks here saw that night, I guess.
Oh, I hadn't noticed that. But that's spectacular. And I should know the region, but it's sort of on the left side of his photo. So his photo is correctly oriented too. I don't know if you noticed that.
Oh no, I didn't. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and then on sort of the left side there, you can see that it's a little bit more illuminated there.
Yep.
And I had noticed that visually as well, and he captures this quite nicely. That although the brightest portion really stands out, if you kind of creep up and to the left along that limb. That area also was somewhat illuminated, and I did notice that even at the sort of maximum eclipse. So he definitely captured a really good impression of what the moon looked like.
Well, and I also love, like, if you zoom in on the photo, like the irregularity along the limb, like the edge of the moon is very pronounced, which again, like, I've never been able to get a very good focus where that kind of detail really starts to make itself visible. So just a beautiful image.
Yeah. That's a great shot. Thanks so much, Ian, for sending that along.
Yeah. Then what's next here? Oh yeah, Corey sent us a really awesome shot. I don't know at what percentage this would be. I would say, I'm guessing 75 to 80% of the moon was in eclipse. And I'm not sure if he stacked the images to come up with this, because normally, to get the kind of that reddening, you end up overexposing the part that's not being eclipsed. But like his gray part of the moon is really awesome. So either he just was able to control it nicely through the photo, or he did do a little bit of post-processing. But regardless, it's a wonderful image as well. I think it captures, again, that orange was so intense in a lot of the photos that I saw, more so than what I remember in previous eclipses.
Yeah, you can actually almost see in his, like, if you zoom in, because we have like the outer edge is the penumbra, and then the inner part is the umbra. And you really start to get that sense when you look at Corey's image that there's these different levels to the shadow that's landing on the lunar surface, which is cool.
Yeah, the other cool thing too with this shot is that he actually captures a lot of the star field around the moon. Like, the moon is actually quite small in the overall frame.
Yes.
And I always appreciate that too, when you can see, all of the other stuff that's going on kind of in the background. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and he sent a very detailed set of observations with it. And I had to shorten them down a little bit, but maybe if you would mind, I could just read through these over.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, yeah. So he said at about 2 a.m., there was a slight darkening observed in the top half of the moon as it entered the penumbra of the Earth. And by 2:19 his time, the eclipse begins with the top half of the moon entering Earth's shadow. And this was very obvious to his naked eye. And he did something super cool. I wish I had thought of this. Is he's built up a pair of these 2x54s that you had made for us, Shane. And he also has a pair of the 10x42 image stabilized binoculars. And so he made some of his observations through that and noted that it was very sort of charcoal in color, in contrast to the bright white of the rest of the disk. And so what he was noticing here is that as the moon just enters that shadow, you are able to pick up that contrast, and sort of oddly enough, you're not getting that rusty red color yet. You're just getting that darkening. Now, when I went out, sort of halfway through, I was getting no color at first, just that charcoal tone, like he refers to. But then pretty soon after that, I was able to see the color that I was looking for. But I was really jealous when I saw his observations. I was like, well, I wish I had dragged out those 2x54s, and I wish I had been able to watch the full event. Because with his 2x54 binoculars, he says that he was actually able to get the Pleiades star cluster on the right and the Hyades star cluster on the left. So the Hyades is another star cluster in the constellation Taurus, and the moon was kind of sitting kind of in between them. And I'd totally forgotten about the Hyades when I was looking, and I only focused with my little scope at the widest field on looking at the partially eclipsed moon and the Pleiades. I hadn't taken a look at the Hyades and the eclipse moon, but he was able to get them both in the same field of view in those super wide field of his binoculars. So said it was an amazing sight, and he said it was just really cool to be able to pan around with his 10x42s and to get those. Then he says by 2:55. Over a third of the moon was covered in the shadow. The orange-red color became much more visible. This is kind of just about when I started, or just after I started observing. He said the umbral line passed through the Sea of Serenity into the Sea of Tranquility. And then by 5:03, the moon was half covered, and a thin band just inside the umbra started to kind of reveal some of those red tones. And then he also noticed some of this blue color that I had noticed as well. And that by 3:22, the sharp line of the Earth's umbra reached Tycho, and he saw a meteor pass through. So I'm not in the binoculars. So I'm not sure if he meant that it passed just through the outer field, or like sort of in line or very close to the moon. I was curious about that. And then he also made more observations with his 2x54s, and was able to see some of the lunar detail and some of the color, sort of slicing across the moon. So pretty cool observation there. Kind of moving on to 3:45. The moon was completely covered by this point. His time, of course, our times all vary a little bit. And he was really able to see that red-orange shadow cast by Earth's shadow onto the moon. And he noted this. I thought this was really good. He started making comparisons between that color and Aldebaran, which is nearby, which is the brightest star that's just over top of the Hyades star cluster. And he also was taking a look over at Betelgeuse in Orion, which is also a bright sort of reddish orange star, and so it was really neat that he was sort of making these other comparisons to these other sort of orange objects in the sky. So I thought that was really, really cool.
Agreed. When I read this I can't talk observing report, I was really blown away. Like, this is a great report of the experience, and it was almost like we were sitting right beside Corey and sharing the binoculars. It was awesome, and I love the comparison to Aldebaran. Again, like that oranginess really came through, and to be able to compare it to some stars that were also in the sky at the same time, I think is awesome.
Yeah, he said it was, and just sort of to conclude his remarks, he said this partial eclipse is definitely trying to masquerade as a total, and only the smallest sliver was left over the left side of the lunar limb remained. So for being the longest eclipse in centuries, the phase was far too soon, as the moon quickly started moving back out of Earth's shadow. And by this point, he was really cold and tired, and was eager to take a look at his photos. And he said it was a frigid evening, well spent, that he won't soon forget. So thanks so much for sending that, Corey. That was super awesome. It really made me wish that I had looked at some of the things you had looked at. I think I kind of had looked for some other things, and it just shows like how two different observers observing the same event are kind of detail it and go for some different stuff. And I can't wait for the next lunar eclipse and remember to drag out my little low power binoculars as well. Super cool. Thank you.
And what I want to highlight, Chris, with like your observation as well as what Corey sent us here, is that for a lot of these big events, there's far more to observe kind of within the event and around the event typically. So, obviously with a lunar eclipse, you're watching that transition and the moon being eclipsed, but there's so many other subtleties to look for, whether it's that blue color that was witnessed, or like how Corey compared the orange to other stars, as well as what Mars would look like through the telescope. I think that's awesome, and I think that really adds a lot of depth to these types of observational events, because there's just so many things, right, that you can try to take in. What I was hoping to hear, and I haven't, so if anybody can fill in this blank for me, I'd be very curious. That comet that you and I have talked about, Leonard, what is it, A1 or P1 Leonard or something like that?
Something, I think A1, yeah.
Yeah. So the recent magnitude reports as of about a week ago had it at around 8.5. And I'm just curious, like, that's the right time of the day to be observing it, was, kind of in the wee hours of the night or the early hours of the morning, however you want to look at that. And then with the moon going into eclipse, so now it's not as much of a factor in terms of brightening the sky. I'm just curious if anybody maybe got an observation of Leonard in there as well.
Yeah, I'd be curious about that. I certainly didn't, because I was observing from my driveway between two streetlights. So
yep, not gonna try that.
No, not at that hour. And for me, it wasn't that cold. It was only -5 Celsius. And there was no wind while the clouds were overhead. And then once the clouds cleared off, we started getting just like a steady, like say 12 or 13 kilometer an hour wind, and the temperature started to drop. And so it went from being about -5, I think, to be about -7 or -9, which made it feel really cold pretty quick. So unfortunately, it got pretty chilly here as well.
Yeah, and what would normally be just a very light breeze during the day, something you wouldn't even pay attention to, is a real game changer at night when you're observing. It's already cold, you're not really moving around to generate heat, and any slight wind, at least for me, usually shrinks the amount of time I'm spending outside by it. It's almost exponential at that point.
Sounds good. Do we have any other lunar eclipse observations or information to share, Shane?
I don't think so. I think that was it. I think the next eclipse is in May, but I'm not sure. It might be more of a southern hemisphere thing, if I'm not mistaken, but I need to look into that. Hopefully we can see it, because May is a lot better temperature-wise to observe these things, but I think we're out of luck here.
Yeah, we'll find out. So before we go for the day, let's talk about calendar giveaway. So I'm not yet, but for 2023, I'm going to be the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada's Observers Calendar Editor, and I'm going to do that for several years. That's the plan anyway. And I did work on it this year, and I have a couple copies of the 2022 RASC Observers Calendar to give away. Sort of first note is primarily the calendar. It's a Canadian calendar, so those in Canada people in Canada is who it's primarily designed for. Probably all of North America, anybody in North America could benefit from it. And even still, some of probably the majority of the information is probably pretty good for anybody. Like, for example, when the moon is full or what phase the moon is at, well, that's going to be the same no matter where you are on the planet. And as well, for planetary oppositions and different things of that nature, it's only going to vary by a few hours, which could just sort of shift things from one day to the next for you, either forward or back, depending on where you are on the planet. So it's pretty good resource, no matter where you are, I think. But I just want to kind of make that note. It's not sort of like a universal global calendar, but certainly if anybody wants to submit for it, happy to send one out. So with that, Shane, I think we're going to do a bit of a giveaway. How are we going to give away a couple of calendars this time? What do people have to do to enter their names for the draw for a couple of calendars or for a calendar? You're just going to get one, or we're going to give two away to two different people.
Yeah, I think just send in some observing reports. That's how we've ran these in the past, and I think that's a good way to do it again. It can be anything. No minimum criteria here. Just send an observing report to actualastronomy@gmail.com. We will put your name into the hat, so to speak, to draw the winners, and then we'll contact the winners after the fact and get mailing addresses to send these things out. And I'll just add, like, I'm a digital person. I really don't like paper in most things that I do. But the one thing that remains is this calendar. I do buy one every year, and I hang it in my office at work. And it's just a nice resource to have as I'm planning vacation throughout the year. Quickly flip the calendar to see when new moons are, and start to plan camping trips and days away. So I like it a lot. I think it's a pretty cool resource. And thanks, Chris, that you're able to procure some and give them away.
Yeah, and I should note, I do this as a volunteer. This isn't like, it's not a job. I have a regular day job, and this is something I do just for fun. But as well, it's a great way to contribute back to the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, which we're members of. And then as well, like, if people do want to purchase copies, I was looking it up just before we did the podcast. I see I think they're like $17.95 Canadian on the rasc.ca store. If you just go to rasc.ca, you can go to the store there, and as Shane mentioned, just submit some of your observations. Kind of hope they're going to be more recent ones, but yeah, we're not too picky. We just want people to reach out and let us know what they're observing. And with that, Shane, anything else to add for this podcast?
No, sir. That is all I have.
All right, super. Well, thanks, Shane, and thanks everyone for listening. Be sure to subscribe in your podcatching software, and we're always excited to receive listener feedback or your observations to actualastronomy@gmail.com. Did I get the email address right?
You did. Yeah.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thanks, Shane, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.